Hi everyone. So, Johanan decided to respond to my video regarding quantum mechanics and materialism. Let's have a look.
To start out, it may surprise you to learn that I actually identify as a naturalist.
Yeah, that does surprise me since you're a theist. The idea that a god can be natural seems contradictory to me, so clearly you must have a rather unusual understanding of what a god is, or perhaps what nature is. Oh well.
Counterfactual definiteness, or CFD, is the ability to speak meaningfully about the definiteness of the results of measurements even if they were not performed. Now let's compare that with realism as it is used in philosophy. Contemporary philosophical realism is the belief that our reality, or some aspect of it, is ontologically independent of our perceptions.
Right, so they're totally different things. One refers to measurements, which are simply physical interactions between systems, the outcomes of which depend on some property of at least one of the systems. The other refers specifically to our perceptions. One also refers to the state of the system, and the other to its existence.
Now, as you can see, these two are effectively the same thing. There is no effective distinction between the ability to speak meaningfully about a result prior to measurement and the belief that these results exist prior to perception or measurement.
Johanan, the definitions are right there. You wrote them down yourself. They're different. If you can't see that, then we really can't make any progress on this issue. Physical reality is not the same thing as the state of a quantum system. Look, A. Physical reality exists. B. In physical reality, there exists an unobserved quantum system Q. C. Q exists in a distinct state S. I can reject C without rejecting A or B. I don't see how this is so hard to understand. Observation, which simply means interaction with another system, affects the state of a quantum system, such as an electron. It doesn't bring the system into existence. If it didn't exist to begin with, it couldn't possibly have been observed.
Well, it existed in that it was data on God's proverbial hard drive or in God's memories before we looked at it, but it wasn't rendered into physical reality before we looked. That's what we mean when we say that it didn't exist before we looked. It's there behind physical reality in the hard drive, but it's not physically there rendered into the computer game quite yet.
First of all, how do you know that? Second, it sounds like you're making a claim about the nature of objective reality, and you don't believe objective reality exists, if I understand you correctly. The claim that reality works like this, or in any other way for that matter, presupposes philosophical realism, which you reject. Am I missing something here?
The two gloves analogy? Seriously?
Yes, a lot of people pointed this out. IP brought up the EPR paradox, and I used the analogy to explain it. I never claimed that hidden variables exist. In fact, as you know, having watched the video, I actually state that I believe that they in fact do not exist. In other words, you can have a theory that doesn't violate relativity, or you can have hidden variables, but you can't have both.
Yes. Thank you for admitting that quantum realism violates relativity.
Thank you, we agree then.
Talk to the Heish.
So recent experiments led by a group at the university.
This is something that really disappoints me. I can't tell if you're intentionally making fallacious appeals to authority and quote mining, or if you just don't understand the problem here. What an expert says must be taken in the appropriate context. When explaining a model, it may sound as though the expert is asserting as fact that the model accurately describes reality, but what he's actually saying is this is how reality works according to this model. You also have to consider that this is an area where the experts have not yet reached a consensus regarding which model best describes reality, and pretty much all of them will say so straight out if asked. This is why context is so important, and sound bites from documentaries are horrible for just this reason. We don't get to hear the actual question given by the interviewer, and it's also edited, so we only get the bits that fit in with the flow of the narration. So you go ahead and pick quotes from experts that at least seem to support your preferred conclusion, and I'll do the same. The many worlds interpretation is trivially true. Stephen Hawking. Have we settled this issue now? No, of course not, because I don't know the context of that quote, and even if it does accurately reflect Hawking's understanding of the issue, I know that other experts certainly disagree. We can turn this into a game of my expert can kick your expert's ass and look for quick quotes that allow us to say, look, this expert is on my side even though he's merely describing a possible model. But that's hardly going to get us anywhere.
Negligible does not mean non-existent. For example, if I were to use the matrix as an analogy, we would have to zoom in very far to actually see the bizarre information processing effects in the matrix. The day-to-day scale in the matrix would seem quite classical, however. But nevertheless, none of it would actually be real.
That would depend on what you mean by real. Yes, it would be a simulation, but it would be a real simulation. Yet in the fictional reality of the Matrix movies, Neo was in the Matrix, and this was true even before he knew about it. When Morpheus gave him the red pill, Neo's reality didn't change. His understanding of the reality that had been there all along changed.
Or as Nobel laureate David Merman pointed out, the moon is demonstrably not there when no one is looking.
This is either one hell of a goof or you just made an appeal to authority, quote-mined, and lied. The quote is a tongue-in-cheek response to a rhetorical question asked by Einstein, and no, David Merman is not a Nobel laureate.
In fact, there's currently no interpretation of quantum mechanics that makes fewer assumptions than many worlds.
At that point, I'd have to disagree. It unnecessarily assumes realism, and then also assumes a multiverse to make sense of said realism.
It assumes philosophical realism, yes, but not what I have referred to as quantum realism. The assumption of a multiverse is not unnecessary. If removed, the interpretation doesn't work. Now, if we were to add the assumption that, let's say, the universe only splits when a conscious observation is made, then that would be an unnecessary assumption. We could remove it and still have a working interpretation. It's just like how we could remove the assumption that the universe is virtual, and the digital physics interpretation would still work fine. Digital does not imply virtual. It could simply be that this is how realities work, virtual or otherwise. I mean, who says a reality can be analog? Who says that a reality can be purely classical? All we can do is speculate about it, really.
Now, your interpretation assumes that wave functions exist as real objects.
What? Like this?
A headline from a popular science magazine? Seriously?
Any properly grounded epistemology will start with Cartesian skepticism. That is, that the mind would still exist even if the whole objectively real material world were an illusion. And if you remove dualism on grounds of incoherence, then you end up with an argument for idealism based on nothing more than proper epistemology before even justifying empirical induction.
I agree that any properly grounded epistemology begins with accepting the existence of the mind. But we're talking about metaphysics here, not epistemology. And also, this argument doesn't work because there's a fallacy of composition in premise 2. The fact that I can doubt the existence of the parts, that is, the matter, does not mean that I must be able to doubt the existence of the whole, that is, the mind. Another way to look at it is, I can be absolutely convinced that the mind exists, but still not be absolutely convinced that matter exists, if I am not absolutely certain that the mind is material. And I'm not. It's simply that I find it far more consistent with the reality I perceive than I do the opposite.
In fact, we don't even know of any mind that can exist without a physical brain that is the product of billions of years of evolution.
No, you have it all backwards. We don't know of any objectively real space-time containing an objectively real brain that can be rendered into physical existence without a mind.
Of course we don't. Nor do we have any examples of realities that we know are the products of minds. We know of one reality, and it's the nature of that reality that is in question. But we have billions of examples of minds, and not a single one of them can be shown to exist independent of a brain. And those minds can be affected by tampering with the brain using anything from chemicals to physical trauma.
Well, it's interesting that you define the physical world as matter and energy existing in space and time.
That's not what I said. Quite the contrary, actually. I even listed space, that is, location, as a property of matter. Yes, matter occupies space, but take away everything in space, and space itself, as well as time, will lose all meaning.
And now to double troll you, I will quote Michio Kaku on magic. Have fun!
I'm a theoretical physicist, and I like to say that I walk in the footsteps of giants like Albert Einstein and Niels Bohr. I'm not a philosopher. However, I am rather dazzled by the fact that many of the basic mysteries that we find in string theory and the theory of everything seem to be mirrored in the Zohar and in the Kabbalah.
I didn't hear anything about magic. I heard that some of the mysteries in string theory are mirrored in various forms of ancient superstition. That's called an analogy. Johanan, it's obvious that we agree regarding the basics. We simply draw very different metaphysical conclusions, and I can't help but suspect that this has something to do with your religious beliefs and my lack thereof. What bothers me is that you seem to think that this is a done deal simply because experts A, B, and C have said X, Y, and Z, so, well, that's it. Discussion's over. No, that's how religion works, and it's how pseudoscience works. In science, as you well know, the accuracy of a model is not determined by who said what, but by whether the predictions made by the model are useful and hold up to attempts to falsify them. It's going to be hard, if not impossible, to figure out which philosophical interpretation of quantum mechanics is the right one, or at least the best one, until one actually makes a unique, useful, falsifiable prediction. And I guess at that point, it's not really philosophy anymore, it's actually science. Now, until then, all we have is a bunch of smart people doing some really advanced math and making arguments. And that may be interesting, I certainly think so. But my point is that we are nowhere near ready to make statements about this subject with the kind of certainty you seem to project. Bye.